So welcome back for day 3 of our committee work. And I have some additional papers in front of you. We'll go over those in just a moment before we get started on our work for today. So restatement again that this committee is appointed by the board to review the curriculum and provide feedback and recommendations to the district. And then we had 3 areas we were looking at: the alignment to the standards, the age appropriateness, and the statutory requirements. And then we had our agreements: staying engaged, sharing perspective, listening for understanding, withholding judgment, focus on purpose, and be respectful. And if you had the opportunity to read the plus delta sheets, we have, again, people just really appreciate the openness and perspectives that we have around the table. And just that ask to be more tight with facilitation, I would call it that. More tight with cutting off when we're storytelling and things like that, and staying true to our topics. But also, another reason I kind of put us in the U is at times I would miss people who wanted to speak. And this gave us a better opportunity to see each other and to get nobody's back is to each other, one another. So hence the layout change. So thank you for that feedback. Again, this is our agenda for today. We're going to go over the committee recommendations. We're going to talk about compliance with the statutes, developmentally appropriate instruction, and alignment to the standards. We've already done that for most of the grades, and then we're going to go through the overall recommendations. I think as we talk about the feedback we've received, and we talk about summarizing the recommendations where they're at right now, and talk about the statutory requirement, we will come to those overall recommendations. Then our last item before we adjourn tonight is communication with the school board. So we talked last time about whether or not we could add on an additional meeting. So I reserved this same space, and we'll make that decision tonight. It may be that the group that comes together is the group that is willing to and able to come and meet with the curriculum committee of the board. And it may be just that group is coming together to finalize the presentation. It may be that the whole committee comes back. But I was able to reserve this same space for next week at the same time. All right, so you have this document in front of you, and I'm just going to go to the actual document, excuse me. This document is the state statute, 118.019, and it's broken down a little in chunks. The first section is items 1 through 9 in the statute. And then you'll see a gray bar. And then item 11 has multiple subsections. So item 11 is broken out a little different, separately. And that's where the gray bars kind of come in. So the next section is 2D, non-discrimination. And that is summarized there. The full non-discrimination section, if you look up at the screen, you can see I have the full 2D here. This is not touchscreen, right? I have the full 2D, the full 3, 4, and 5, and the full definitions. I felt like this would be helpful as we're tracking what we're saying about each of the standards or each of the statutory parts. So scrolling, I'm going to scroll further down. So 2D, then it goes on to 2M. And the 2M part of the statute says this instruction in these areas is provided when developmentally appropriate, and when determined by the school board. So the different components of that part, when developmentally appropriate and when determined by the school board. The committee that came together previously in 2014, 2015, put some of the pieces, well, put the pieces in place. So when we are going through and talking about, in watching the videotape last time, I know it's on video now, I realized how many times I said, oh, my, like that drove me nuts when I was watching the video. Oh, shared that with Jody before. Anyway, in section 2 of the statute 2M and then the following areas, the statute reads, include these when age appropriate. The full 2M is listed, but our previous committees and then approved by the school board would have decided what was appropriate or not. And so that's our charge here as well. And then 2S was allows students to be separated by gender for instruction. 3 is providing parents with the outline and how they can inspect the curriculum and the opportunity to opt out. 4 is the opportunity to opt out, and 5 is the formation of the advisory committee. And again, I have the full standard on this document, but we also have it in our not standard, excuse me, the full statute on this document, but I also have it, you have it in your binders as well. So on some of these, I already put in. Our previous discussion indicated that these things were not appropriate for, not age appropriate, for our 4th graders and our 5th graders. And there are some things like if you look down in section 2M part D, that one talks about abstinence and sexual being the only abstinence from sexual activity before marriage is the only reliable way to prevent pregnancy and sexually transmitted diseases, including HIV and AIDS. And I didn't mark it there because, again, I wanted to have some of that committee discussion here. But I did indicate how HIV and AIDS are talked about in 4th and 5th grade. The bulk of that item is not appropriate for 4th and 5th grade, but we do talk about HIV and AIDS as a bloodborne pathogen. So in a few moments, we'll get into the statute and kind of share our perspectives on what we found in the curriculum with statute, and what our questions are, and what our recommendations are. I did go ahead. One of the asks was how might presentation to the board happen or look? So I did go ahead and draft what that might look like based on some of the things we've already discussed. So based on what we've already discussed, committee purpose, you've seen this multiple times, reminding the goal, and then I just went into overall recommendations. So again, this is draft, so at this point, I felt like these were pretty solid overall recommendations of the committee, but it's not complete, and the wording may not be right on some of them that are actually on here. So the committee needs to take a look at that. And so again, we have revised the medical information now and more frequently. The statistics were out of date, and we need to establish a process to update the statistics, whether that is every other year or in Winnebago County, we have the studies that I put in there, the last Winnebago County YRBS, Youth Risk Behavior Study. Winnebago County? Did I say Winnebago?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, cool.
Washington County. Sorry. Yeah, Washington County, the last Washington County Youth Risk Behavior Survey that was on the Health Department's website was from 2018. So, making sure that we are revising along with that information, along with, someone pointed out in their feedback, the information from 2020 in there, and our instruction hasn't responded to that. So we need to, based on these comments I put in, that not only based on all of them, that we need to revise our medical information now and establish that process. So what would the process be annually? So I think that's a recommendation of the committee, but it wasn't specifically worded that way in the feedback. So, and then I left it blank because I didn't know how I wanted to do that. Revise the language to be biologically based, from the female, sperm is from the male, ensure language is inclusive, not all children reside with biological family. And so that would be throughout, that would include the heredity section and things like that. Provide clear and specific list of trustworthy resources. An additional course should be added in the 7th grade. And we went back and forth on that, 6th, 7th, and so I want to come back around that. Again, this is draft, and what I pulled from looking at the comments. Provide clearly scripted information on making health decisions. So we talk in there about, in the curriculum about making health decisions, and it's recommended that we provide clearly scripted information on that, such as referring to the parents and your healthcare provider. We have that actually later on too. Revise the outdated images and language references. So in language references, when it talks about watching music videos and some other things that may be a little outdated and not what kids are doing or how they're accessing things today. And we have, I put in here, include where one can get menstrual products at school. So these I put in as overall, and then encourage for grades 4 and 5, you're actually going to see similar things on grades 4 and 5. Encourage speaking to a trusted adult about menstruation without emphasis on it being a female. And when discussing vaccinations and antibiotics, note that the parent, guardian, medical care provider, has the best information for you on these topics, and update the letters to include the medical professionals. Grade 5, number 1 is the same, and number 2 are the same. And 8, I don't know if you can just type to read that. Does it help someone to hear it out loud?
I think it helps to do that. I mean, I think, so otherwise I don't know who's going.
Enhance instruction around how to manage a risky situation and refusal skills. The media-wise skills need to focus on both, males and females. Enhance the disease prevention / information and instruction, inclusive of testicular and ovarian cancer and disease prevention through contraception. Enhance instruction on sexual abuse and rape, and include instruction on how drugs and alcohol can contribute to decision making. In the negative way. Include information on the influence of pornography, and when discussing vaccinations and medications, oh, that's the same one. Note that the parent, guardian, medical care provider has the best information for you on these topics. Website revisions include the curriculum details on the HDD page, not just on the course overview page. And so we want easy access for parents to this, so that you don't have to dig down deep into the website. And so that's pretty much where I left it.
I was going to ask, so even with that letter that you just gave us now, when I go into the 8th grade and I try to track, and maybe I'm just getting it wrong, I don't know, but when I go to that website, it's still, right now, it's still just the overview, right? They really can't get to a curriculum.
I didn't make any changes
Yeah.
in that, so it goes to the course overview.
Yeah,
I didn't make any changes to that during this committee work.
right, okay,
And the target would be to, so right now, what we have is how do parents are told to contact their principal for the full curriculum.
okay,
But we give the outline as described in the statute. We
okay,
provide the outline of what it is.
right,
And our course overviews have what's required for course overviews,
right,
but the full curriculum is not on there. We
Okay.
would like to make that available.
okay, perfect.
All right, so that's what I have in there as a draft right now.
Or is that based on, the notes that we turned into, is it like kind of what people had?
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
also, are we able to get those back
Right?
for reference?
Yes, so I will have the, I'm going to pass these out. I think that I'm going to have you, well, let's see if I can just do it really quick.
One, I don't know how detailed we're gonna get as we're going through, but one thing that I think might be missing from up there that we might wanna add, because the only contraception I saw in, even in the 8th grade materials was condoms, I believe. And I feel like you guys, you've already told us that you do have a nurse come in and talk more, or a doctor's gonna talk more about other forms of contraception. But maybe that should be kind of listed somewhere, so when parents see the full curriculum, they're getting to see like what contraception is gonna be discussed and whether it's birth control, contraception, and that kind of thing. You know, like there's nothing, the only thing that I found in the materials that you gave us was condoms, but I know you teach more than condoms. So there maybe should be like a list somewhere, like,
Yeah, I agree.
yeah, okay.
So,
Okay.
sometimes I'm just going to repeat what you say because it's easier in the note taking
Right,
later
yeah,
if I repeat.
okay,
So one recommendation that we would add to the list is, again, list explicit resources that are shared with students regarding and information regarding contraception.
I noticed in the 8th grade, the media was
Yes,
listed. I feel like that's important at the younger grade. That's not. I guess maybe, never mind, I'm scratch, I think it's not part of human growth and development. It's important for them, but doesn't necessarily fall under.
I agree it's important, and I think we learned last week it's covered in other areas,
I apologize.
but it might be good to reiterate it in there too.
It just
So,
caught my attention.
Yeah. No, I don't think there's anything to apologize for that, it's a good mention,
so,
so, yeah.
so going
Jody-
off of that
Jody-
stuff,
hold up. Jenny?
So, Jody, is yours relevant to what we're talking about?
yeah, I was just
Okay.
gonna say, going off of what you were saying then too, like, I just wanna remind, because I don't know if that was I can't remember if that was actually in your list of recommendations. But again, even when we know that, okay, we're gonna teach that, but not necessarily in these 3 days, we're gonna teach it over here. That somewhere as part of the full curriculum, it should say, we do cover blah, 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 but it's gonna be, in gym class during blah, 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 so that everybody knows eventually it's covered, it might not be in these 3 days, but it's gonna be covered here, and this is how we're gonna cover it or something. Like, it should still be there for parents to see that,
I thought about that too, just like when we were going over the standards last time, like after the guy went home, I kind of thought about it, just where we were talking about the different areas where the standards are being touched, it would be a good idea to show, be like counselor connection. Like I don't even see, like fire teachers don't really always see what's being taught in the counselor connection, we know what's happening. But even as like a parent, maybe there's some kind of document that we can create that has a standard and then shows it's being taught by either being taught in counselor connection or it's being taught wherever, classroom teacher. I think would be very easy to understand for everybody.
I agree. So when we do the comprehensive health review, of all health curriculum, making sure that we're mapping out what other curricular what areas these standards and this curriculum is covered in. Because there are interconnected and overlapping standards. So we will identify specifically where those are taught and by whom. Because sometimes, as you stated, it's counselor, classroom teacher, or by ed.
Okay, so, I love this, I think this is fantastic, maybe in future classes, like ahead of time, a copy like this, because I mean, it's so simple to be like, what you're looking for, instead of read here, look here, so I love this sheet.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
I
looks
think you should make one for the standards too, that's just like that.
like very similar.
Yeah.
Maybe even have maybe one for each grade, like a fourth grade, and then have the standard, and then, right behind it, have the
Because the
statute.
learning priority.
Yeah, and then just have space to write, because this might just not be enough space, but yeah, I just wanted to add that. And then I wanted to ask Lance, and then obviously see what everyone else thought, like what, right now, there's human growth and development going on at Silverbrook, right? You guys had it in fourth and fifth this week, right? Yeah, or fifth grade. Maybe it would be a good idea to offer everyone that would be in this committee to go to that, if they wanted to. Would that be a possibility? I mean,
I
because
don't know
we're.
if that's a question for me.
Oh,
Yeah, so so in our presentation from the PowerPoint that was sent out for April 19th, the ending slides have the recording of that presentation.
Oh, okay.
And so if you scrolled down, the last slides will have, the female is all in like one long presentation, and then the males is divided up into short sections. Some are 7 minutes, some are 12 minutes or whatever. And so they're all on there so you can see how they're done.
Okay.
The parents are invited into that. I always go, do we allow someone in the space that's not known to the kids? That's not familiar with them. And I would invite you to look at the videos
Yeah.
versus
We
the.
did that years ago, maybe 10 years ago, we had a school board member sit in and make a piece of it.
Oh, really?
Very,
Okay. I suppose it is that age.
yeah. A lot of questions the next day.
Yes. You don't want to make them all.
Thank you.
I didn't know who's. Yes, Troy.
I'm not sure this is what we're doing this, but just a couple things that popped out and looked at it again was the risk assessment. And two things that were statistically very different in Washington County were vaping and bullying. So I don't know if that, one of the things is how alcohol and drug use affect responsible decision making. And I don't know if it's just worthy of noting, our vaping levels are higher than the state average by a certain amount, which I thought was interesting. Same with bullying. So I don't know if we just factor in when we're thinking about recommendations as we walk through this.
I'm sure that's covered in other,
Yeah,
some of those
it's
other areas. 'Cause I know there's like a specific section like just on drugs, right? And then I don't know if bullying's tied in with that. Or if
And
that's
Too Good for
separate,
Drugs,
but-
there are bullying lessons within that. But that's also, go ahead,
So Too Good for Drugs was good.
both. Too Good for Drugs is both in
Or
fifth
fourth and fifth.
and in sixth.
Oh, okay. Both fifth and fifth?
The last several years, it has been. It wasn't like that, when did we made that shift?
When we started.
There were some adaptations to the lessons this year as a result of the examination of the two curriculums with, second step and the, Too Good for Drugs. So some of the lessons were removed for sure. I'd have to go back and look at which ones. So with our second step, we have anti-bullying things in there. But in our notes, I think it I think a recommendation of the committee could be one, in the examination of the whole health curriculum, the things we talked about. Two, in the examination of that, ensure that bullying is covered and what we know about vaping in our local area, make sure that that's hit hard. Probably won't say it like that. Okay, so we wanted to focus on the statute today, and I told you that I put down those NAs that got us started, but that's not the ending or the affirmative. Let's go through the statute now, and let's take the first section, which is it's items 1 through 10, but just a reminder, the statute has irregular numbering because they eliminated things, they did not renumerate. I'm going to move over there right now. I can see everybody here. I am moving over there. All right, so let's go through the statute, starting with number 1 and going through 1 through 10 regarding, is it present or not present, or NA being it is, NA would mean that it is not applicable, as in, we don't feel that that's developmentally appropriate. What? It does, I think we're okay, I can see it here. Any comments on, number 1?
We were just talking about it's worded kind of thing. Like, we understand what they're trying to say, but I could see also how it could be misunderstood or. Right. I see what they're saying.
Right. Well, I think the first thing is, since we don't talk about sexuality in 4th and 5th grade, it probably is not applicable for 4th and 5th grade at this point. And, but it would be applicable for 8th through 12th grade or not?
If you read the actual statute, it's paraphrased on our sheet. It doesn't actually say about sexuality, it's about health and optimal health and well-being. So
I would also probably argue that writing about your own body is still sexuality.
that's.
Yeah, it's just not,
Oh,
if you look up the
It's
definition of
yeah.
sexuality, it's
Sure.
not the action per se, but the feelings and a person's identity and relationship to the
okay, yeah, then it would be appropriate then. Okay. That's good. If it's worded that way.
I mean, it's definitely not a word that I used in my 4th grade lessons,
Right,
but if you look up the definition.
right, that
you
makes
know,
sense,
right.
yeah. When I'm looking at it, I'm thinking of it talking about, yeah, I guess we should use the word whatever, and then we go to, it's not about that, it's about sexuality. All right. So, were you supposed to tell you if it's applicable or not applicable?
Present or not.
Present or not?
Present or not present?
So probably it's
Not,
present. In all of them. Yeah, it's present in all of them.
Yeah, I think one thing I noticed in some of the slides, it would say talk to a trusted adult like parent, relative, or, pardon me, it would say teacher, relative, or healthcare professional. And it really should say parent, teacher, other relative, you know. Be
Yes.
very intentional about including parents.
And that's already been discussed several times, it wasn't
Yeah.
a recommendation, so
Yeah.
sure you are listening to people.
Yeah.
Right, but in the recommendations, it didn't have that specifically saying, make sure that the parent is listed first.
Yeah.
As the first trusted. So
Yeah.
we just want to make sure that that's part of the order, so I do agree with that.
Like in the,
in that draft,
Draft
I showed,
presentation.
like, of the,
So if I take the three of them.
It kind of it kind of indirectly referenced it in the draft recommendations, yeah.
It said parent/guardian/
And we want to have for parents.
We would, yeah, and I would say wherever we put parents slash.
Yeah.
I want to note on here, where it starts with number 1, that, number 1, starting on here, is really in the section under 2 that where it starts talking about instruction on the statute document. The first ones are on another tab on the sheet this is on, because it provides, like, section 1 actually provides the definitions, like what does age appropriate mean, what medically accurate means, the information that is scientifically based, appropriate and peer-reviewed journals and textbooks. Then 2 gets into the subjects, and which says that the school board may provide an instructional program for growth and development. And when if the school board elects to provide an instructional program in this section, when the school board establishes a curriculum, the school board shall make determinations as to, and if so, for what subjects are covered in the curriculum, and whether or not the pupils shall be separated by gender. And then it goes on to describe the numbers 1 through 11 on here. So just to clarify that. So if you're on your statute page, it's about halfway down the page where the first one is. So to summarize, we felt the importance of communication about sexuality between the pupil and the pupil's parents or guardians. This is also, I believe, where we are saying, these are questions that you need to take home. And these are not questions that are answered at school, because there are certain things that aren't answered at school. And that's also where that statement comes in. So we said present in grade 4 and present in grade 5, is that accurate?
Yep. Our presenter on Friday has been doing it for years, but it was great to have her back in person. And when a child verbally, because they're asked to write it down on note cards, if they have them, they don't have to obviously. But when they verbally posed a question that wasn't something that we would discuss whole group, she said, "That's a wonderful question, feel free to go home and ask a trusted adult." And she just was ready and, said it, and it was, absolutely perfect, and allowed the rest of the lesson to, flow smoothly without interruption.
I think that's wonderful. I also think maybe at the end of the day, maybe the teacher would mark some of those questions down themselves, and then maybe, since communication is so easy nowadays through the internet and stuff, maybe that would be something at the end of the week, that these are some of the topics that came up that we decided would be better off handled at home. And that would, because some people, the kids might forget by the end of the day that, oh yeah, I wanted to talk to my mom about this, or maybe they feel weird once they get home. Like maybe it wasn't such a good question, but the parents know that these are things that came up in class. It would give them something to, oh yeah, maybe I should be talking to them about
I think
this.
we did talk about, compile a list of questions that were written down that maybe weren't discussed, and so maybe if there's verbal ones. I remember having a conversation about it to where potentially that would go home to parents, as here were just overall questions that were asked that didn't, that the suggested kids talk about it at home with their parents or guardians or adults.
Yeah, I think we talked about that the first day, because I think I brought that up, because actually the provider suggested that opportunities for the parents to talk about it more with their kids at home would be important. And if we send a list of questions that were answered and questions that were asked and not answered,
Yes.
would support the parents in having dialogue at home.
Right.
So that's not on the recommendation list, so we'll need to make sure we add that in.
And maybe we could be really clear in that, to make sure that the questions that we are sending home are the ones that are more value-based. Like if it's,
I think we just send home all the questions.
okay, No,
Not
no, but I
parents.
meant when you're actually having a discussion in class, it's gonna always be the factual stuff, like, we're gonna talk about abortion, this is what abortion is, where it happens, but we're not gonna discuss it all about opinions of whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. That goes home for the parents to
Grade
discuss.
4 and 5 level, we're not talking.
Right, but I'm just saying this for an example, because we have 3 areas to go there, I'm just saying that if or what, that was just an easy example, abortion, I know we're not gonna talk about that in 4th and 5th grade. But whenever there's a question, any topic that's up, it's mostly supposed to be right, like, all the stuff that's medically, factually based, and anything that's value-based isn't even really something that the kids should be discussing in class, because then the teacher even has to be involved in almost shining their opinions if those things go home to be discussed, and that's, oh, this is a question you might want to talk about with your kids at home, because we covered this much of it, and we didn't cover this part of it.
And Joni, I feel like in general, those are things, teachers don't want to be an active participant in those discussions. But even like generically, like when some kids say like, oh, I got to stay up till 10:30 last night, and others say my bedtime is 7. Like those are things we say, and every family gets to determine that, whatever
Right.
works best for their family. So like on things that don't have so much of a value concern, I think that's just a given, like
Like you guys.
that's not our role, we
Yeah.
share the information and we
Right.
share, the science or the facts behind it, but we definitely
Right,
have always put that, some kids are reading Harry Potter at 3rd grade, some parents say, nope, that's too mature for you, we're gonna hold off till 5th.
right.
Again, that's a decision that your family gets to make.
Right. And
So-
I believe that there's a lot of good teachers like you, but then once in a while you might get some people
Oh, I hear you,
that
right.
don't know. And so if it's just part of the,
Mhm.
if we have a part of like written down somewhere, then every teacher knows, what's
I
expected
think
of
we're
them.
getting off track.
So number 2,
I would say it's present in 4 and 8 through 12.
and then number 5. Seven,
I think this was one of those tricky ones.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a topic of discussion. The information to do this stuff is given, but there's not directions to do it. So the information is there, but there's not
So you're
specific.
talking for all grades?
Just mainly, 4th and 5th, for sure, yeah. Agree.
It was touching on different people.
Right, and that's where,
In high school too.
right, and I feel like
Different more.
that's where that,
Did you get
Where that went.
answers on if it's taught somewhere else, if it still covers?
it's still okay.
Okay.
And we have that overlap of, it's not specifically in the human growth and development. It's not as developed in the human growth and development unit, it might be touched and introduced, but it's more a part of deeper instruction in other units, the idea of goal setting.
So again, is it okay for us to say not present?
And then notes,
And then-
comments, I put other, units, or cover the other.
Yep. It's okay for us to say that,
It's state statutes.
Yeah. correct? Because there's some local control about deciding what and where. And in 4th and 5th grade, with it being the 3-day units, so it's not really a full unit, it's 3 days of instruction on human growth and development, full unit in the upper level. But here, they're just mentioning things.
So-
And then,
Lance, is that then presented in the too cool for drugs part? Or-
Goal setting, actually, in the second step, in school studies.
Okay. Stress management? I know, but they don't do it in class, they actually do it at 5th grade?
So again, that would be in the past, it would have been Too Good for Drugs. And
Motion
So as far as the high school, the 8 through 12,
Could anybody
it
find it?
is not present in
And
human growth development.
Oh, not.
Is it still held to the same standards as the statute?
as far as healthy life skills, goal setting and your decisions, communications, and stress management.
Yeah.
It also happens to be part of our curriculum because of prior health and goal setting. Setting that goal kind of.
And I wasn't looking, so I don't remember who was talking earlier about, in 4th or 5th grade is the counselor connection or whatever. But the definitions in here say kindergarten to 12th, so it's not necessarily that these things have to be covered in the same years, I think, as our HGB stuff, as long as they're being covered, like, in the span, is my interpretation of that, is that?
Yeah, it's because the statute's written throughout, your school, and so anytime we're going to teach human growth and development, we have to consider this. We happen to decide to do it in grades 4, 5, and then 8 through 12. Other districts do a little bit every year, and some do it just like us. It really depends on the school district.
I kind of feel like the every other kind of like thing, because it's like the transition, preparing them for the next transition, and you may need to look at 4th, 6th, 8th, and sophomore.
I had that written down to bring up later when we get to recommendations. I remember when I went through middle and high school, they were very intentional about 5th grade, 7th grade, 9th grade, and 11th grade. So that every other year. So the idea would be an alternative to implementing a 7th grade curriculum would be to move the 5th grade to 6th grade and expand it a little bit then to start beginning to touch on some of the topics that will be taught more in depth at 8th grade.
I like that idea.
Yeah, so that's another option that we could recommend.
Yeah.
I don't know what that looks like for 8 through 12, because you only have to take it once.
Yeah.
So I don't know what
Yeah.
that looks like and how that changes. And
Yeah.
I mean, that would be a significant change, I would assume.
What would be a significant change?
In 8 through 12, you're only required to take it once
Yeah.
between 8th and 12th grade. And it's like a whole health class, correct? Was my understanding, not just, so
Right,
that's
It's
human
a-
growth and development. This is just part of
yeah,
an entire health curriculum that is an entire year class.
semester.
Oh, sorry, semester.
Yeah.
Um,
but I
So I
think
don't,
we
I just don't know what
remember
that would look like.
80% of them, roughly 80% take it in 8th grade. So, yeah, the best.
Or you do a 7th and then like a 9th.
Yeah, no,
But I'm just saying, like, if you require it every other year, I don't know what,
We used to be
How
9th
that-
and 11th, 8th through that year.
Wow.
right.
I think the recommendation to change the frequency is probably enough for this, the scope of this committee, like coming up with the nitty gritty of when is maybe a little off. I just wanna make sure we get in.
Yeah,
I
agree.
So,
It gets really good conversation.
so we would keep that recommendation, take off the grade level, and the future work that has to be done as a result of our recommendation would consider that and determine that.
Different
Makes more
timings, different
sense.
frequency.
I kind of, I don't want to get too into the blogs, but I like the idea of presenting both options and the idea that during those developmental years between 4th and 8th grade, it really should be having something at least every other year. And yeah, I agree, we want to stay focused, but there may be some details that are good to recommend, so.
We can start discussing and just, you can vote.
Yeah,
Okay, so number 8 then are now.
Yes.
It's not covered, but it's.
I think
There was something,
12,
there was something
Yes.
daily that discussed it.
I think it's a very, I think like maybe one slide.
Yeah,
It wasn't much.
It was more like, it's hard to make responsible decisions every day.
Yeah.
Yes.
Basically,
Yeah.
that's basically it.
Yeah, but it wasn't really detailed. You guys did dig deeper on that?
It's covered a lot more in the drug and alcohol unit,
Okay.
and then it gets touched.
In the drug and alcohol unit of health class.
Yes.
So we don't have anything that's taught in health class. Is that what I'm?
You have the human growth and development unit.
So, but if some of this is being taught in the health class instead, right? I feel like we should have that.
Right.
Because to me, that says it's not, it isn't taught. If I look at this and I'm like, okay, is this present? No. If that means, because it's not in my binder, because we're here to review, then it's not taught.
And it was brought up, I believe, by Troy, it was like when we talked about schooling safety, it was brought up, and it's covered in other areas.
Yeah.
We should have something outlined
Yeah.
in the other units too. So I did know that, which would cover what you're saying.
Thank you.
And this is really helpful because like our end product of what we communicate out. So, in addition to the curriculum, even identifying for families where these things are met would be helpful.
Yeah.
Easy access.
Do you want to say that 8 through 12?
No,
I mean,
seriously.
if there's one slide, do we want to say that's pleasant or not pleasant? I don't feel like
It looks like.
I wrote just one slide.
And I checked it, but noted, covered more in the.
Yeah, yeah.
In that, when we come back to that draft recommendation thing, just keep in mind, one of those draft recommendations from our other notes was that it needed to be more robust, the impact of drugs and alcohol on your decision making with regard to sexual activity. So just keep that in mind when we come back, if that's felt that we need to hone in on that more for that. Media.
I don't think that was present.
I saw one Media Matters thing where they were talking about videos, like music videos, and that was it.
And that's the one that says you get thrown up to the.
Yeah.
In the slide through fourth and fifth talk about body image and that models are not.
Yeah.
They do a little going and dating scenes and.
Yeah.
And they're doing that, yeah, in fourth and fifth grade, right? The body image in
Yeah.
fourth and fifth grade, yeah.
Yeah.
So more in 8 through 12, is that,
Yeah, we're having more in 8 through 12, right?
or is that covered in health?
The media wise was one of the things that.
But is that all, or do you do more on body image, maybe, stuff like that? Or is that it, just the video?
It's covered in other areas too.
Okay. Like in the council connection or something?
Well, it's related to sexuality though.
Yeah.
So shouldn't that be covered then in human growth and development?
Yeah, it's mostly it, but it's also special.
So I think
But-
just
so I
be
don't
more
see the
clear
binder.
on how we're doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's more clarity. And
Right.
This sounds something where.
But you referred to, like, you're saying that.
Yeah, just think so, because that's what fall under the media component. And the adoption resources, prenatal care, and postnatal supports are, specifically for 7 and 8, or for the 8 through 12.
Right, and there was nothing.
We're on 10.
I think I saw a little bit about prenatal, but it wasn't actually like in the slideshow, it was like on this, I don't even know what.
And all that big,
Yeah, the page
summary
that's
stuff.
like,
Yes.
I mean, if the main goal is abstinence, is that something that should be discussed?
Well, it has to be.
Well, and
Right, I think
Right,
I said
so
the
what I'm saying
number
is it
one
is-
thing has to be abstinence is the best way, right? And I think we all live in the real world, we know kids aren't gonna listen to that.
Yeah.
And so you have to at least give them that other, this is what's out there, but the best thing to do is, right? I think,
so it's possible that was weeded out before, and what I'm hearing is we really need this to be part of it for our kids today.
I think.
Well, and isn't that the class too, or the irresistible wrong class, where when I'm helping out, when I used to, I don't know if they even do that,
We have a child here.
Spartan daycare thing anymore that they used to, like school or whatever. But, yeah, they have one where they take home like a big baby. and-
Yeah, they still do.
Yeah, is that in this, or is that in something else?
No, that's in, child development.
Child.
Oh, so that's something like an elective, so that's not something.
So they do the baby carry.
I just want to point out in this is like the learning plan for 8 through 12. It says pregnancy, birth, and childhood. This topic, the focus would be on students, I'll just do them, development before birth, healthy pregnancy, childbirth, childhood.
Yeah, but did you see it in the actual lessons?
I'm just saying this is where I read about it.
Oh,
Yeah.
sure, but it's not in the actual lesson.
Or is that-
It's not
It's
in
not in the slide.
It's not in the slide.
But that's probably like a summary of what the
Yeah,
lessons
it's
are.
the unit outcomes.
Yeah.
And then additionally, there is also, going back to the number 9, the media one,
Mhm.
there was also more about media, I apologize, I'm trying to find it, but I just saw it. There was
In
something
the
in regards to
sequential
that
learning
as
plan.
well.
Do you think this is also like, do we ever go through, or actually looking at the development of the baby through the 9 months? Like, it wouldn't take that long to actually show them how the baby looks at 8 weeks and 12 weeks and whatever, because that doesn't come here. Part of it, could we do that? Okay, is that part of this, or is that?
Yeah.
Okay, so I think they go into detail about it.
But it doesn't show
It
that
may not be
in
in
there.
the slides.
Not in the slides, correct.
No, but I mean, even in that, I don't think that they go through each month.
Well, I don't think that they list everything. I think they're just
But,
giving
but,
it
but,
sorting it
but,
over.
if you look at the statute, that's what we're here for. The statute says that we need to be giving the parents a complete curriculum and all the materials, all the instructional materials. So to say it's not there, then we're lying if we say it's complete. The statute says we're supposed to give them a complete. So if we're teaching them that, it should be listed somewhere that we do go through the
Well, that could be a
prenatal
recommendation.
development of the baby. It should be in there.
That could be a recommendation.
Right, so that's a recommendation.
And I think that is
Okay,
right.
thank you. Thank you. All right.
11?
11. So 11 has the full statute has, under 11 is really the nature and treatment of sexually transmitted infections is like the heading. And then there's the C, D, E, and F are listed. So 11 is separated out, so those can be addressed separately.
I just want to clarify for 10, were we saying that it's present, not present, or
The
not
adoption
applicable,
resources
or?
are present, but it could be, the specificity could be added in more explicitly.
And this is where we're also supposed to be talking about where we can, where a person can relinquish their baby,
Oh, the new one.
That's
or that's on a different number altogether.
Yeah, we don't.
Okay, all right.
So
Something like that would be
Like that it's being taught, but it's not in slides. is what I think.
we have,
That was Tom, by the way. So it's part of discussion.
Okay.
It's not in slides.
he's not physically here, but he's listening to this.
And I don't know if you can hear, but go ahead.
So one of the things that we do is, we teach this previously, and then we revisit it. It's not in the slide, but it's always brought up, because we talk about relinquishing the child, adoption services, fostering, and like that. It may not be specifically in the slides, but still we discuss all the time, because it's part of the topics that we cover.
Is there a way that we can make that into the slides? Because, yeah, okay, because I mean, I love knowing, and I love having you guys in here so we can get that feedback. But just think about if you weren't. And we'd all be like, nope, not in here.
And that's good
It's not
feedback for
fun.
us too.
And Jody, just to clarify, what we have out there publicly is what is required to have out there publicly. And if a parent were to call and say, could I get a copy of this, or how do I see the full thing? Then that would be sent to them. And for example, a fifth grade parent called today about that. And so the things you have, those 3 days, and then the slides were all sent to them.
Okay, good.
So moving on, the 11C, address self-esteem, personality, personal responsibility, positive interpersonal skills, and healthy relationships.
You did.
Yeah, is that in relation to that? The nature of treatment of sexually transmitted infections?
Yeah, so the, that is specifically how it is listed in statute is we have the nature of and treatment of. But addressing self-esteem, personal responsibility is, because these are subsets of that, it should be in connection to that.
Okay.
So talking about healthy relationships is part of being in a healthy relationship is having communication if you're engaging in sexual activity with someone and be open about that, right? So,
And I don't think it's present in fourth and fifth grade, is it? Because I'm not even hitting that, and anywhere near that.
yeah, they're not bringing in relation to sexually transmitted
Okay.
infections and self-esteem. So I
it was not present in 8 through 12 then,
and
as related to sexually transmitted.
in the healthy relationships section, we're talking about that. Yeah. And we're talking in the section on sexually transmitted.
Yeah, it is present in 8 through 12.
The personal responsibility, oh, telling your partners. Is that the part you're talking about?
Like how to say no and stuff, I think. How to refuse and stuff, assertive.
And
Yeah,
even
But
like,
it's,
But this is supposed to be
Possible
only about the
relationships.
nature and treatment of sexually transmitted infection.
I do believe it's there in the, what were you gonna say, Stephanie, I'm
I
sorry.
just said I see where she's coming from. I think it's present. I don't think it really like ties super well into sexually transmitted diseases, but it could just be kind of broad, you know, if you can connect it in some way, if you think about it, but it's not like explicitly connected.
And do you think it should be? You're an art.
I don't really know how you would. I mean, I think it's just the wording of this is bad and we can't fix it. Because if you talk personal responsibility, the only really personally responsible thing you could do is treat it and let other people know you have it.
and I think it talks about that specifically.
And
inside.
interpersonal skills of an STI, I mean, I don't know where they're going. And I think to me, the biggest thing that I saw was like abstinence is the best way, you're not gonna get this kind of thing, but,
I wonder if
So-
it's trying to imply that if kids have a lower self-esteem, they're more likely to be promiscuous. And so if we're boosting their self-esteem, they're less likely to be. Does that make sense?
Does it
Does
make
that
sense?
seem-
As we think about our kids and this community and
Yeah.
kids coming up, when we look at what they should have with regard to the nature and treatment of sexually transmitted infections and healthy relationships in these cases, Stephanie, I think what you said, would you mind restating that? I'm sorry.
which,
When you talked about the personal responsibility being
just letting people know you have it. And I think like my head, when I see STI, I'm thinking like gonorrhea, chlamydia, but we're also forgetting that like HIV and AIDS falls into that, and that's something that people have forever, you know, potentially, so, you know, the healthy relationship is a lot heavier on, like, in relation to that than just, you know, letting people know. You know, like, it's a lifelong commitment to be with someone and things like that, so just those interpersonal skills, I guess. You could think of it like that. I think it's covered, I think it's just worded.
Yeah, there it is. If a person finds out that he or she has an STI, it is also important to notify any sexual partner so they can seek treatment as well. So are we gonna count that as a yes then?
correct.
It's
Yeah.
11D.
I don't think that's present. In that section, it does tell you it's not your fault, you can leave, but it doesn't give you any resources in any slides.
I think local resources might be helpful too.
Right. Well, now I know it's, well, maybe it's not. You know that new-ish hotline that the school offers now to speak up? It would be a perfect opportunity to throw that, so every kid can see it.
Okay. So we need to hone in on that more. We still, protective behaviors is taught what levels?
3 years, K through 4. 2 lessons.
Okay.
And grade level.
Protective behaviors is the safe touch, don't touch things. Not part of HGB, but.
Well, it's younger, correct. So obviously this is going to be a much more serious conversation. Because I was looking at statistics while going through this, 93% of women know their attacker. And so I think as a high school student, that, not just girls, but men too, I think it's a very important thing to let them know about.
And I think we have, when we come back to our recommendations and stuff like that, that final, like that draft of that, it's sort of mentioned in there, but the point was that it needs to be hit harder.
I would say it's present, but very weakly present. Is that fair?
I don't think it's present, period.
Oh, you're saying it's not present?
Counseling, identify counseling, medical, legal resources for survivors, no, I don't think it's brought up in here, period,
In the slides?
in the slides.
I feel like I may have talked a little bit more about the other parts.
So we've had a partnership with Friends of Abused Families, and they have an education prevention person that comes in team, does lessons with the counselors. In the elementary, there's kind of been a hiatus because they had to rehire a new person, but they just let us know.
They come to high school.
And they do a special talk outside of human growth, or during a human growth development.
It's during pregnancy.
That's
And like
awesome.
I said, it was last spring when she left and it took a moment to get a new. Yeah, but they were really awesome and they gave us our regular presentation stuff. So we still got to cover, even though they didn't come in, but we still got to go over it too.
It's just nice to have that community.
I would love to have that in the binder.
Yeah, should be.
And they're really awesome that they had no problem with that.
Cool.
That list of, we have on the recommendations, that list of resources that need to be added.
Right.
So I guess I would agree with you, Jenny, based on what this says. Counseling, medical, and legal resources for survivors of abuse and assault. I looked, it wasn't in the additional.
What are those additional notes? Are those teacher notes that you?
They're in the beginning of the 8th grade.
Yeah, I have it.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, is that teacher?
Those identify, so we used to use something called bringing on curriculum, which is where we laid out, and so there was the overviews, and this was the details. And so that was all.
So the teacher would have this as they're teaching with the slides. So they can talk about, make sure that whatever's here is also brought up just in case it's not on slide.
Present information about avoiding I skipped B. Excuse me. Address the positive connection between marriage and parenting.
I think that's fine.
Presenting information about avoiding stereotyping and bullying. So we've already talked about that a little bit. I recall we wanted to really be more explicit and keep that up.
In all grades.
Yeah.
But that's underneath sexually transmitted infections.
Yeah, we're like,
So, while I agree with you, if we look under the heading,
that's true.
that's in relationship to. Correct.
Correct, you're correct.
So no, so not present before.
No.
Add more of it to high school.
I don't think
But it's
that-
covered in.
I just don't know
Right,
how
it's not applicable.
stereotyping.
But not
and bullying-
with
well, I
sexually
suppose
transmitted.
I could see stereotyping with STIs, but I guess, in bullying.
Oh, I see.
Okay,
Yeah.
The HIV
okay,
and how to treat people who have
Sure.
HIV.
Yes, that was,
That was in there.
Yeah.
I think that would fall into that category.
yeah, so that's present, technically.
And, oh yeah, and so maybe in the stereotyping and bullying, like, oh, it's STDs.
so we're saying that's present in all, correct?
I don't
said it was
think,
not applicable for 4 and 5.
Yeah.
so 8 through
Well, they do
12,
talk about that.
present, but add more.
And
That's
talking
true,
about,
right.
they talk about AIDS and talking about like how you can't, you know, you
Oh,
can't
it's
get
on
it.
that, yeah.
Right, it's more the blood piece.
Right, they say
Right.
talk about.
But then I thought,
It's
and I
in a
think we-
developmentally appropriate way then.
Yeah.
They're talking about it in 4th and 5th.
Yeah.
Like,
I was gonna say, I think they talk like in terms of like, oh, you can't catch it by touching somebody, you know, so I think they're
Right.
trying, they're getting at like the stereotyping and like bullying sort of aspect by like,
In a developmentally appropriate manner.
right.
So the non-discrimination is really how we go about doing things, and we have to go about it in a non-discriminatory way. So we don't actually need to fill that part out because it's how we go about doing it. So then this next section is 2M, and it's the presentation of the curriculum, and this should all be included when it is developmentally appropriate or age appropriate. The specific wording of 2M is required subjects. If a school board provides instruction in any of these areas, and then those listed below, the school board shall ensure that it conforms to another statute, and that the following is provided when age appropriate in the same course during the same year. So, this is, what it's referring to is when we provide each human growth and development curriculum, we also include these things when it's age appropriate. So, abstinence, we said was not appropriate in 4th and 5th, 8th grade. Presents abstinence from sexual activity as the preferred choice.
Several times.
Yeah, what's present, yeah.
D. And then the note on the side, what do you want to put for 4 and 5?
I think that's covered then in I. Like medically accurate information about.
Yes.
So not applicable in 4th and 5th for D.
And then I covers it for the younger kids.
Thank you. So we're in agreement? Go ahead, Kate.
We're not I yet.
That's also
These
HPV,
Yeah.
and that's not included in
HPV.
4 and 5. But HIV.
Yeah.
So, I would say present, I agree.
I don't think for high school for after. Oh, I keep forgetting to think about this, but I was only looking at slides really,
There's a significant amount in that
in
additional
the addition.
about pregnancy, prenatal development and childbirth
Yeah,
for 8 through 12.
Okay,
And then I would say that's not applicable for 4 and 5.
Did you, for F, did you want me to put add more? For F?
I think as long as it's talked about in this teacher section, and then that is absolutely talked about to the children.
So G also has to do with dating. So when high schoolers who are sexually active are not old enough to give consent for sexual activity. And so that's what this part is talking about. Correct? So they're not at the age of consent for you to do that, and kids have to know this. So that's why that's covered at that age.
You're talking about DT, and that's covered. I don't,
It's in,
that's what I'm looking at right now, I don't remember.
it's not a specific slide.
So potentially
Do you
we need to
think-
enhance our instructional resources, is that true or not? Or,
I don't see that.
Agent consent.
I don't think it's on this slide.
Is it, okay, so I've had this conversation with my kids and other adults. Do you think it would be, so like, when kids are like, oh, but I'm 18 and they're 17, that's like, oh, well, we love each other, it won't matter. Something I reminded them, I'm like, it doesn't matter, if that person's underage, their parents are the ones to press charges. So it doesn't matter how much they love you. And that, they were like, oh, like, it was this whole other thing that they didn't even think about. And they were like, well, I'm never gonna date someone, 17 and I'm 18 then, because what if, But it was just, is that something that would be pertinent to bring up in that kind of, I
feel like the more information you can
Right.
give and
to scare them?
actually, especially to be like, well, no, but I mean, like, there's real consequences.
Yes.
And if you don't know what they
Real.
are,
Right.
and you're just
Yeah.
having a relationship, like, you could be,
Yeah.
that could change your whole life.
Yeah.
Well,
And there's no language that states that it was an 18 and 17-year-old, or if it was an 18 and 12-year-old, it's the same language. Sure. So it's, it doesn't, people just look at it and.
Well, as even when you look at something as simple as alcohol, if you're 18 and you have someone under 18 with you, you're gonna get in trouble, if they're drunk or whatever, because even if it's your birthday, you just turned 18, so. So if it does it for alcohol, it's gonna for sure carry over for sex.
So that one goal leads into H.
Yeah.
So what are we saying not present, I'm assuming then, or
Not present.
And
G?
and then also age.
Yeah.
Because,
Okay, so we need to enhance instruction in those areas. And, human papillomavirus is what was coming up as we were talking previously. Can you talk about that at all? Because I didn't notice, I didn't see us talking about that.
It was mentioned about HPV.
I don't remember.
Yeah. HPV, I remember seeing something about it in high school.
High school list.
It sounds
You
right.
don't enforce it.
Well, yeah. HIV and AIDS
Right.
makes sense for fourth and fifth, because there's
But not
such robust other ways to get it.
Yeah.
HPV is a little more specific, but I don't think it's appropriate for violence.
Oh, I want to note that it's not appropriate for fourth and fifth.
Right.
Like, that's all present, not
And then-
HPV, not.
And then- Okay,
I don't remember, was it talked about in other? It is, okay.
in that list.
In this section? Oh, it has this, so it must have been- okay.
Can we just go back to H really quick? I just wanted to know, so did we say that, I know it's not in here, but that we are teaching it? Or we're not teaching it?
I think we said not
We're
present.
not, so we need to add it.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's not within the slides, yeah.
Okay.
I think J's the new one, correct? So that obviously needs to get added.
The relinquishing has to be added into the slides.
So,
Yep.
HPV should be listed in chapter 22, because I just got done talking about it in the slide.
Yep.
We have this,
We got it,
did
yes,
like that.
we're yes.
Thank you,
Yes,
Tom.
it's present.
So, and relinquishing a newborn, we need to provide the specific language for that.
You guys, we're doing so good tonight. Don't jinx it.
Okay. So are we on US now or what?
Yeah.
I was just gonna say, I'm wondering, look, we had kind of like a brief talk about that at the first meeting, but, and we said right now we're separating biologically boy and girl. And it seems like the statute's pretty clear that when they put this together, that that's how they viewed, gender was boy and girl. Do we need to have it in writing somewhere that that's how West Bend does it, is biologically by boy and girl? Now that we're not.
That's how it currently is,
Right.
it's just that, it's
But that's just
separating
fine.
males, females,
Yeah,
biologically.
right.
I think that would be a good thing to add though, because we have a slide that's saying that we're gonna be keeping pregnancy or like egg and sperm to biological to male, female. So I think it would be good to break this down as well and say that we have females, biological female, split by biological female, biological male.
I saw that on the recommendation, but it actually, I think we determined that that is how it's presented.
Yeah.
And forth and like all of it, it's like, the egg comes from the female.
Right.
Like, that's
No, I'm
the-
saying like the
No, when we
wording for
split the
this.
kids up, like
I
we
know,
want to make sure that they're
But
split
she's
up
just referencing that,
biologically.
and it was on the recommendations to like
Yeah.
change it to that, but that is the way that it actually is
Yeah.
listed.
Right.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, I remember when you and I were looking at it last week, it does say mother a lot, and it
There
does
were
say,
mother, father on the number.
like on the
And I think
actual
that's
slide.
what we meant.
And I
to
think
change.
that's what they were talking about.
Okay,
Those are
Yeah, and I think being consistent is key, right? And so if you're gonna split them up by biological female, biological male,
maybe that goes in the letter.
And if we have split them specifically in 4, 5, and 8.
if they take it, Nate, is that what you're saying?
And
Is this on this letter, or are you saying it should be somewhere else besides?
It says biological female,
It
biological.
doesn't say biological.
Right,
Right,
but
that's what we're saying.
we want to say specifically, so there isn't a question in the future where someone's like, well, I identify with this or that. We're saying, well, biologically, when we're teaching this class, this is where we're putting, how we're splitting people biologically, with the biological gender.
And I'm not saying I disagree, because I do agree, but I don't know if, because this doesn't say biological, do you know what I'm saying? I
think
agree, it should be
recommendation,
biological.
maybe we should
This
put it,
doesn't
Right.
say biological.
so I think that's just the recommendation.
Right, that we do it, because as long as by making it biological, you're not going against the statute. You're just
Right.
enhancing the statute, so I think it's okay to
Okay.
be specific, so we don't have to worry about when that comes up, this is the way
We already added.
we do it.
So then we would be present for 4th, present for 5th, and present for 8 through 12, correct?
Right.
3 is that we provide parents with the outline and information on how to inspect the full curriculum and the option to exempt out, which we do. And then 4 is that no pupil is required to take it if the parent or guardian files with the teacher or the principal a written request to be exempted. So we have those processes in place. And 5 is that this committee is meeting and talking about this.
Did we just throw it out there? I mean, I don't know who decides how often the committee meets, but do we want to throw a recommendation out of like what we feel might be appropriate and how often, or that something be set or put into place?
I think that's a great idea.
I think that, I agree with that, it used to be regulated in statute how often the committee met. They removed that, which frankly, fortunately, during the shutdown, it would have impacted us, so. We're on it right after that. But it used to be regulated in statute, no longer is regulated in statute. I would say, we also have that potentially in the recommendations, if you go back to those drafts, that we're gonna revisit medically accurate information at some frequency.
When it was in the statutes, how often was it?
Maybe 5 years.
Oh,
That's,
Yeah.
I don't like that.
I was
I mean,
just
are we
gonna ask
talking
that
every
question
2 years?
too.
Is that, what's everyone?
2 to 3?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And also, before we write a new curriculum, like you said, the new health standards might be coming out next year. we should definitely, I mean, before we devise a new curriculum to meet with the new health standards, I think you need to have the advisory committee looking at all this before we implement it in the class.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the health standards are released before they're adopted. That'll be, we'll have to review them like we do a curriculum.
Okay,
So we don't have a date on that, we just sometime.
Their DPI is saying they will be ready for public review sometime next year.
okay.
What's the time?
So 2023
Yeah.
would be another review, and then every 2 years after that, unless another. Well, right,
Unless there's changes.
unless there's another
that require-
state change.
And
Or
unless the state, yeah. So the last time the standards were updated was 2010 for the state. I don't actually know when the district adopted the state standards for that. I don't actually know what year we did that, but I would say it's sometime since 2010. Yeah.
Is there any decision made around when, if the survey would be, like, so when we talk about like updating our data, I feel like this review would coincide with having fresh data.
It really would. So in the next school year, we should be invited to do, I believe it's next year is when we would be invited to do the youth risk behavior survey again. And so it would be good for us to have fresh local data. The last time we did it was in 2018, and we revised, West Bend specifically reviewed and revised the questions and eliminated some, and then made it parental opt-in. So those are the things that I would expect to happen. We elected not to do it, it was determined not to do it the most recent time. So 2018 is the time that we have all the data for right now. It was done sometime during our period of intense COVID, and we didn't elect to do it. So it should come up next. So I feel it should be coming up again shortly.
So when we didn't do it the last time, was it the school board that opted us out of doing it, or how does that?
I believe so. I believe that, that we, so DPI invites us to do it. It's not a requirement.
Is it a decision by the board or by the school district?
We have, anytime we've done it, it's been, I have to go back and review. I'm really sorry.
No, that's okay, I'm just curious, and I'm curious too about why we would have it be an opt-in instead of an opt-out.
That's specifically part of our board policies, that any survey like that is an opt-in.
Got it.
That way your child is maybe accidentally involved in taking the survey, because the parent has to specifically say it's okay in order for them to be in it, otherwise it might get.
Well, I'm just saying even everything else is an opt-out, if I don't want my child to participate.
Oh, right, so it could be.
So like the curriculum itself is
Yeah.
an opt-out, but we have a specific board, and it's in the 300 series, which the board is looking at now. And will be for the next couple months. There'll be a policy review of that, but that is specific in board policy. When a survey is done by an outside organization, it is parental opt-in. Stephanie?
You guys had someone who mentioned that you're doing sixth grade now. Has fourth and eighth already done it?
Yeah, so each school has different days that they're doing it. Again, 4 through 5, the medical providers are the same going to every school.
All right, well, I guess I'm more focused on eighth anyways, so like that, learn roughly.
Tom, you're teaching it right now, right?
So I guess what I was getting at is the changes we're suggesting you guys make as for eighth grade, talking about the sex offender registry, that's not gonna be done this year, or can it be put in if you're still in it?
So the
Broader.
recommendations we make will be presented to the board. So we're not changing the curriculum that's currently in
Okay, so next
So
year.
some stuff might be missed this year. Does that
From
get
this
us-
list.
It will.
So does that
Because
get us
we
in
have to
trouble?
go through, it has to go through, we're making the recommendation.
Yeah.
We'll take that to the board, then the board will direct us to revise the curriculum.
Right. So does that get us in trouble for breaking the statute?
No, we'll be okay
No, I
because
mean,
again,
currently the year happening right now.
correct.
Okay.
Because, no, and we won't simply because it is when the school board approves the curriculum, we're doing what the school board approved previously. And the statute reads, when the school board approves a curriculum, this is what it needs to include. But there's local control there. And so you decide with your local values, and so that's how the curriculum came to be. The last committee made recommendations, then the curriculum was revised and the board approved that.
Okay.
So,
That makes more sense.
yeah.
We would be able to see that since this committee will be going on at that point.
It'll be some work, and then that'll go out for public before it's actually approved by the board. So, if it's all virtual, it'll, yeah, so like in our family newsletters, we'll say when curriculum is up for review. Those go out to members of our public and are publicly available on the website. So we've had a number of things that have been up for review this year. And we've been partnering with our public library to have resources there during their open hours because people can't always get to the district office. And what we had done previously is we would host an evening. So several years back when we were doing biology, we hosted like an evening event here at the high school, an evening event at the ESC. But then we met with people outside of that as they scheduled. Now it's at the public library, it's available on weekends. So it will be announced when that's available.
The thing I've been thinking about is the age appropriateness. We're usually talking about the younger, younger or older, but when we saw the statistics about kids who were taking the eighth grade curriculum at the senior level, we were all kind of going, is that age appropriate? And not, because we're going, who wants our kid to wait until, so they're seniors to learn this, and we know they're learning this through TikTok way before that. I guess my question is it possible for us to consider a recommendation where, and I don't know if it's 4 or 5, 8, whatever, is it possible for us to say to the board, hey, we think it would be wise to require an 8th grade, like to require this high school curriculum to be taken as early as possible, 8th grade? Because otherwise you're going through 3 years of high school not knowing this stuff.
So it's possible right now to go from fifth to senior year.
Right, not many, but.
Right, it is a possibility
Most
that
people
that can
take
happen.
an eighth grade or ninth grade.
Right, but there were some, right, that were.
Yeah, there's a
Yeah.
couple.
And it could be because of move-ins, people who moved into the
Right.
district but didn't have that graduation requirement met. Could be choice. It could be you failed it and you needed to retake it. So we looked at the numbers of people in it,
Yeah.
not why.
And also like if they're coming from a parochial school, they might not be required to, but they might not even line up with their class with what the public school is doing, so then they have to wait till they get to the high school meeting to do it in ninth grade.
I think that's why it would be beneficial, like we were talking earlier, to say that, like you said, 8th grade,
Require it.
require it, and then have 9 through 12 that you have to take at some point. And maybe it's not as strong on human growth and development as it is on health, that for high school. But I mean, it's obviously still taught, but it doesn't, because it's taught then mandatory in 8th grade, it doesn't have to be
Correct.
so strong.
Which
But what
we
about
talked
the parochial
Yeah.
then? The parochial would wait till ninth grade to be
Well, we
required
can't
to do
tell
it?
what the parochial.
Right, but
and
that's
I'm
what I'm
gonna-
saying.
I think I know what you're gonna say, come back to our position. No, what do you?
Right.
Well,
Sorry.
am I a broken record?
No.
We did talk about that too, though, and I feel like it was, somebody said that they didn't really want to give up the option of being able to take an 8th grade for the high school credit.
I know.
And
That's right.
so it didn't seem like that was something that was.
There was
going to
something,
be-
there were
That is
more
really-
things at
it is
play
really
than
nice
just.
thing.
So even 7th grade.
Yeah.
I think, are we like, Don, I had like 3 things that I saw in the 8th grade curriculum. that
No, we
maybe-
didn't do standards for, so we still have standards.
Okay, so there's 3 things that I noticed in the curriculum that maybe need to have they're quick things, but they need attention maybe. Like in the endocrine system, we're missing slides 17 and 18. I don't know if they're important slides, but it says, I noticed.
I don't know if it's a misnumbering or what, but that's literally how we have it.
Okay, and
Well,
then,
and that brings up, can I add to that real quick?
yeah,
I was gonna say, what if for the next committee, it's like kind of mandatory that the previous committee, like our final recommendations, or maybe what the board decides, like that gets written up and given to them to read that first week or two before we come to meet.
yeah,
That would make sense.
So then it's like, slide 17 been removed, and we're like,
right.
And as we store our
17,
curriculum.
17 and 18 for the endocrine system are missing.
Okay.
And then in choosing abstinence, risks of sexual intimacy, there's two slides. One is slide 8 of 21. And that slide, it appears when you're reading it like it's endorsing sexual activity. So
slide number again.
slide 8 of 21 for the,
In the endocrine system, did you say?
no, that one is for choosing abstinence, risks of sexual intimacy. For slide 8 of 21, it kind of looks like they're endorsing sex, so I think if we added 2 bullet points to that slide, it would not look like we're endorsing it, so one bullet point might be,
Hold up.
okay.
Are you talking about the sentence where it says?
That's what I have
to say. Yeah.
She said slide 8 of 21 of the chapter.
Okay.
What's finding proof from the day?
Okay, yeah, so one bullet would be sexual fidelity is,
What's section 21?
no, it's slide 8 of abstinence risks of sexual intimacy, that section. So it would be sexual fidelity is best practice within the confines of marriage.
I don't want a slide that says that.
No, I'm adding that bullet point.
No, but the slide 20,
We're
there's
trying
no
to
section
figure out.
21.
No,
Yeah, there
no,
It's 22.4 on the top left.
okay. And then the other bullet point I thought would be monogamous agreements with teens rarely last. One, word it differently you can, but where you're, so I don't want to look at monogamous agreements with teens rarely last. So like, teens might think, oh, I love you forever and ever, but they rarely last. So like, just reinforcing these
Cover
ideas.
that versus love versus infatuation.
Right, and then that
Okay,
slide,
you can't
it
add
just seems like if you're just looking at that slide itself with
We
also
did
the
that
bullet
every
points,
year.
it looks like it's kind of endorsing sex with teens. So by adding these couple bullets, you're reinforcing the idea that, that you want, that it's best if it's done in marriage, that with teens, these relationships aren't probably gonna last.
So,
Kara?
And then one more.
Hold on 1 second, please.
because like this is about infectious disease. There's stuff about relationships elsewhere that says that.
Right,
This is factual when you're talking about infectious disease.
right,
What is fidelity? And if both
Right.
people aren't infected, it can't be passed. So like that's factual. There's nothing. Like
right, but
valid.
you're
Yeah.
still reinforcing the fact you're not gonna have a sexual disease if you make sure that if you're reminded that that you're practicing it within marriage, right?
I think it goes back to the,
I still
Yeah, go to.
I think it goes back to the standard, which says that we should be teaching the primary method for avoiding diseases is abstinence.
Which is else.
And this
right
doesn't
here.
Slide
mention it
9
in
kind of
here.
covers that too a little bit,
Top.
if you go up to the top slide.
Let's see.
But this is about infectious diseases, not about.
But you
But
still,
the best way to prevent
Right, to
them
prevent
is
abstinence, right.
That's right out of the standards.
Well, we can't add to these slides because this is through the Pearson program, so this slide would have to be removed. Or they would have to add those little tidbits at the end of the.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's hear what Tom has.
Go ahead, Tom.
Okay. Chapter 24, it's like a continuation of like another section where we talk about infectious diseases. So, like in my class, I don't show slide 1 through 10. I just go right to HIV and AIDS. So there's information that you may have
well, now you just brought up a whole new thing, so now a whole new thing is, we already felt like we weren't given everything or enough stuff, and now you're telling us that what we do have probably might not even be covered, so we're looking at stuff that the kids might not even see, which I'm glad you're being honest about it.
He said it was covered in.
No, in other areas.
Right, but
Other slides
Okay.
within the unit.
If you look at, okay, 24, slide 4, it talks about abstinence, murder abstinence throughout the whole entire thing.
yeah,
So it's just one
Yeah, we're just talking about this.
okay, all right,
Does that make sense?
All
Yeah,
right, so,
okay.
we are at 6:38, and I just wanna say, you guys rocked it and cooked through a lot tonight, so thank you. Through our discussion and through the feedback provided, we have some information on our 8th grade standards, and so I have that on the standard review document. Here. I have that information here on the standard review document, which you have linked up multiple times, but I'll send it again tonight. And so from our, sorry. Never mind. We do have certain things in here on 8th grade from some of the statements that were made, but not others. And I did not necessarily fill in where it was, we have the yes or the no and the, or no. So we do want to quick go through here. And then I want to ask, we have next week reserved, I have the space reserved. Before we depart today, I would like to come back together to do the presentation. I feel like we got a lot from the recommendations. And I want to just talk about that process before we depart. So I'm going to come back to this one, and if we could go through 8th grade. We had some previous discussions on some of these, so I'm going to turn so I can move it up and down so that you have the most up-to-date one. But my back is going to be to you. So standard 1.
Let's increase the view a little.
This side.
Just or the,
Like
the Zoom.
Yes.
Just, zoom in on just the recommendation.
Or just so little bigger.
Oh, you presented.
Yeah.
It's gonna like that.
Yes, much better.
Even that side.
Better?
Yeah.
Very good.
Okay.
Yep.
And so they're making me do this. So standard 1, and just a reminder, again, these are big, broad for all health. So we may not find human growth and development specifically reflected in the standards and the learning priority. It may not be in the human growth and development curriculum, and that's okay. We're more adherent to that statute and what we locally decide as far as the instruction in statute. So high school learning priority was examined and apply health concepts related to health promotion and disease prevention. And just a reminder, they're taking it in 8th grade for high school health, so we're looking to meet those high school standards. Health concepts related to health promotion and disease prevention. So we've already said it's present in grade 8, and we have comments on that on our other documents, that there are some areas where we could enhance that.
Right.
Is there any other recommendations for this standard for grade 8?
Would this be like where recommendation to add an additional year or level that this information is? I don't know where we put that recommendation or how.
We already have that recommendation, I don't think it needs to be linked to this.
Okay,
I don't
to this
think-
particular thing.
Yeah. As long as we're recommending it in vague or everything, Perfect. Thank you.
So in the overall, analyze influence of family, peers, culture, media, tech, and other factors. That's the big overall. Evaluate how influences impact health behaviors. So we talked about hereditary, the media, I'm just gonna make a quick note here. We wanted to enhance our,
Right.
recognizing body image and stuff like that. Demonstrate the availability to access valid information and products and services to enhance health. In high schools, examine strategies to access valid and reliable sources of health information. And what we shared before was this: provide a list of trustworthy resources and check for inclusive. These are two separate things. This is what we said before. Next one is 4, students demonstrate the ability to use interpersonal communication skills to enhance health and avoid or reduce health risks. High schools analyze various communication skills that enhance health and avoid risks.
Cover that, but that it could be definitely improved in terms of the risk aversion.
That's recognized.
Yeah.
Standard 5, demonstrate the ability to use decision-making skills to enhance health. Examine the use of a decision-making process.
And I think we said that was covered in other classes like bias or something, right? But we need to note it as such.
Yeah, we're all the same, where, whether it's right, how.
Yeah. So it's not really covered much in the HGD, but they're saying that it's covered in other areas, but we need to make sure that that's noted somewhere so people know where they're finding this, where they're getting this specifically.
So when you would link all the, I'm just making sure I'm saying, when you would link the HGD curriculum on the school's website, would you also link health?
I think you reference, so we'll have a person who's really good in web design work with that.
Because because if it's being not here but here, and it's also one class for 8 through 12, then I think it should just
Perhaps
be.
it's just overall health and HDD is under that umbrella.
And here's
We're
where,
currently working on now, anyway, here at high school. For having multiple places, to make it easier, right, easy access. I think that would be easier.
Yeah.
Health, table of contents that are linked, go to these places.
Yeah.
Awesome.
all right, and all health there and not just HD. Correct.
Which is what we're currently.
Yeah, that would be great, because I was, because I didn't understand really the concept that 8 through 12 was not human growth and development. It was literally split into 2 different categories. I had no idea. I just learned that tonight. That's something new.
The health unit or the health class.
And my kid has already taken it, so. Right.
All right, standard 6, students will demonstrate the ability to use goal setting and in high school apply goal setting, and so we wanted to link that again.
Yeah, I always thought it was the same as standard 5, but I guess it is 2 different standards.
7 is the ability to use health enhancing behaviors to avoid or reduce health risks. And we continue, and then risk avoidance here.
And we list out contraception that gets discussed.
Even if it is, it's just, it's go back.
Okay.
Oh, wait, and then she did, Jen put to,
Contraception, what'd she say?
This says
She answered me.
contraceptive.
Yeah, contraceptive and birth control.
That it gets,
Listed.
listed, so adults or, you know.
Oh, but that's not in the goal set.
No.
That's on the demonstrates the ability to use health enhancing behavior. Oh,
For
sure.
senior setting?
Okay.
Oh, no, this is health enhancing behaviors.
Yeah,
Contraception and birth control. So, well, they actually are two different things. Birth control is making sure the baby isn't born that's been,
Birth control.
Yeah.
well, birth control can be like the
We don't
egg,
need
the
to do
fertilized.
No, don't.
the
It's
fertilized-
contraceptives, it's an umbrella, it covers all of that.
So standard 8 is students will demonstrate the ability to advocate for personal, family, and community health. Personal? Family and community health, and then apply skills to advocate for a health issue. And so as far as, again, linking that to other areas of health for them.
So do we teach abortion?
No.
We don't teach about abortion in 12th grade.
Oh,
Okay. Okay, good.
Um, those are other notes.
Well, that's good to know. I didn't know that. Teach that.
These are other notes that were in recommendations, one of them being consider local development of standards. Where this group came to was when the new standards are released by the state review. Additionally, the Human Growth and Development Advisory Committee would meet more frequently, was one of the recommendations as a result. And I don't know, did we come to consensus on every 2 years? Or did we not? Or did we say?
because it could go, it would be super fast even, it wouldn't even probably be.
Yeah,
Well,
to
right,
go
it'd
from
be more
change to implementation would take some time.
Because the committee isn't necessarily the same every 2 years. It would, I mean, some people would potentially come back, but some people wouldn't, and some new people would want to join.
Maybe encouraging new people,
Right.
instead of just, you know, like, you just sign up every 2 years. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, so I don't know if that would be as much of a.
Somebody said Tuesday, so.
I mean, do you think every 2 years is every other year?
Yeah,
So that seems very frequent. I would say every third year.
yeah.
seems
And I would agree
appropriate.
with that when you think about changes that we make are not being, are maybe implemented next school
following
year.
year.
Because
Yeah.
there's work that has to be done between here and there.
Right.
And the board would have to approve that, and that process could put it in place. For sure, if it's always in spring, it could be in place for spring, but it would be some outside the window approval, which is fine. Kate?
Kind of just a question like, so if they update all the standards and stuff, that would obviously be like a cause to be outside of a 3-year window.
Correct.
Would you reset the 3-year window?
I think I would, because
Okay.
you'd be
I think
revising
so
things as a
too.
result of.
I just want.
So it wouldn't fall to next year.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it wouldn't be like, oh, we just met because there was new stuff we're meeting again. Like, you could have a reset of the clock for 3 years.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
Should I take off 2 to 3 and just put 3?
Put 3,
Yeah.
and then if new standards cause a different revision, we adjust the schedule. I think that will, okay, so, you guys, curriculum should be finished this evening.
Laura, sorry, Stephanie had her hand up.
Hi.
I was just curious if there's, I mean, obviously, you know, like the medical world is pretty fickle, so, I mean, things change all the time.
All the time.
Way more often than 3 years. So if this information becomes inaccurate or not, you know, acceptable, then how does that look?
Yeah, so I think what,
Like,
Right.
like,
do you do?
So just for notes, I would like to make I think we need a procedure for this committee, committee procedures and processes, right? So the fact that it would meet every 3 years, and one of those things, like I threw it up there because it was throughout your notes. The idea that medically accurate information needs to be provided, and so this should be updated. I think if there was some new discovery that went, whoa, this is what we now know, we need to reconsider that, and I think that we need to put in a process for that. So I would say we get our healthcare providers together. If the statistics were no longer relevant or accurate, like this has been a long time since these were revised, and we've all noticed, like, when the statistics are no longer accurate, we should be able to revise that. So verifying it, I think we should, what is your recommendation? Verify?
So for next year, are you gonna continue to use, I mean, this stuff is accurate, but it's also 8 years old. So even just like, in nursing and other jobs, there's usually a cap of like 4 to 5 years to where you really shouldn't be using that information, even if it is accurate. I mean, there's some things that never change, but I guess it would.
Or maybe you could have like a note on it that would say reviewed 2021, 2022 or something.
I'm sure, yeah,
Well,
I'm
right,
sure
because
Pearson does on their website.
Because you can't change the slides, you said.
Right, right.
So it's like, you can't even
You
be
have to,
like,
like-
oh, well, that information's incorrect, because you can't change the slide.
So what I would, where we need to go with health is reviewing the whole curriculum, right? But what we can do is review and revise the human growth and development unit. So based on these recommendations and the fact that we've stated in our in that draft, I put that information needs to be updated, statistics need to be updated, need to be using vocabulary, current vocabulary, sorry, I'm gonna stand up because I'm fully.
That might be better for when the state comes out with new stuff, though. Obviously, like, I'm not saying this stuff isn't,
Yeah.
because it is.
Yes, some of the local stats and things like that we can revise, right? So we can put in a new slide. While it can't be injected into there, we can take the slides. There's a process we can use to create that. Okay, so we did those standards, we'll get that noted. We have drafts of recommendations, both in what we shared today and what was on that presentation draft that I showed you. How it would work is our volunteers that would be able to come to the curriculum committee, which is still currently scheduled for May 24th. And then the following board meeting is June 7th. So once we meet at curriculum committee, sometimes the committee will say, okay, let's move this on to the full board, or we'd like to see you back here next month. And so it depends, right? So it's currently scheduled for May 24th. Board meets Monday, we'll do the reorganization, so there could be a change, but we're gonna stick with what's current, right? May 10th is our next time, I have the space reserved. I would like to invite anybody who wants to come and be part of formulating this presentation, but I would ask the full committee to review it once we send it back. And, does anybody know if you would be able to and willing to come next week? Excellent.
Same bad time, same bad channel.
Bingo, right here.
All right.
And we're gonna do a work thing, so I'm probably gonna have devices here because I want you to be able to see it live and edit it live, so that while it's up here, great, but if you can have it in front of you. So I'll have Chromebooks here. I'm going to send a calendar invite. Could you reply yes on the calendar invite if you can come? And so I'll send a calendar invite to all of you. And then, again, the 24th, I'm going to send a calendar invite for what I project to be the time of that on the 24th. And if you can participate in that, please also respond yes. I'll adjust it if it changes.
Did you want us to leave this?
I do. If you can leave any of those notes, that'd be great. Okay?
How many people do we have like a cap of number to send to the curriculum committee?
We don't have a cap, but presenting at one time, we probably would have no more than 4. But the others could be in the audience and may, the committee might go, well, what did you think? Or is there anybody else from the team? And they'll look to the team.
And depending on what time the meeting's at, some people, it just might not be convenient for some people to be there anyway.
That's
Like,
correct.
Yeah.
So these 2 presentations will be shared with you. You'll get 2 calendar invites. And I have to say thank you so much. I thank you very much. Different for Jim?
Well, I don't mean to interrupt your thank you, Laura, but first of all, thank you and thank this group. It's been awesome for me just as a new member to this community and a clergy person just to hear the wonderful conversations here. And I just want to share with you this group what happened this Sunday. One of our confirmation students helps with our Sunday school, and she's currently taking the curriculum. She says Tom is tough but fair. So I think that's a compliment for Tom. But I also talked to her mother, and they've opted into everything, and they're very pleased with the curriculum and that. So it spurred a great conversation with them. So real time, what's happening, I think that's a credit to you guys and the faculty here. So thank you guys for what you're doing for our community and students and parents.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And again, we couldn't do this without all of you. So I will see whoever can be here next week to work on those recommendations. I don't know that will be live streamed. It seems like it's a work session and not the committee action. So I'm not sure that one will be live streamed, but I'll double check that. Yeah.
Have you found out, who's on the curriculum?
Or no, because they kind of reorganize, yeah.
Okay.
So they'll have to reorganize.
There's a meeting Monday, do you think they would talk about it Monday?
Yeah, I think they'll talk about it Monday. Yeah.
Okay.
Lance, we can see from. Well, thank you again, everybody. I'll send these drafts out.
Yeah.
And then, like I said, we'll have to write the next time.
Whatever. One of the options was just so you could get